Mark still says it wasn't the wind. Not far from the tree line of Banff National Park, the kind of place Americans book for real wilderness. Iron stove, big windows facing nothing but forest and mountains. The storm hadn't. The temperature had plunged below zero. The world outside was just wind and white. Then something slammed into the front door, not scraped, not brushed, hit. Sarah shot upright in bed. That's not the storm. Another impact, heavier, followed by a low, broken rasp that didn't belong to wind, wood, or weather. Alive and hurting. Every instinct said, don't open that door. You don't open doors in the Rockies at 2 a.m. during a blizzard. Not unless you're ready for whatever's on the other side. But the silence after that second hit felt worse than the noise. Mark grabbed the flashlight. His brain cycled through worst-case scenarios. Moose, something desperate and dangerous. He eased the door open 3 inches. Snow blasted in. He opened it wider. The beam caught black ear tufts, ice-clumped whiskers, wire embedded deep into swollen flesh. Blood had frozen along the leg in dark, crusted lines. The lynx's eyes flickered open and locked on them. Not wild rage, not fear, exhaustion, and something like calculation. It had dragged itself through a storm to their door. Why here? Sarah whispered. There was no answer. Only wind, and the animals labored, breathing. Mark checked his phone. No signal. Nearest help was miles away. In this cold, that paw would mean infection, shock, death. They weren't vets. They weren't wildlife experts. Just a couple from Colorado who thought they understood mountains. That decided it. He moved slowly, speaking in a low, steady tone that he hoped sounded calmer than he felt. Easy, easy. He threw the blanket over the lynx's head. The body under it exploded. Claws slashed through fabric. A deep snarl vibrated through the wood porch. But exhaustion beat fury. Together, slipping on snow and adrenaline, they dragged the animal inside and kicked the door shut against the storm. Now there was a bleeding predator on their hardwood floor and no one else coming. Sarah dumped the first aid kit across the coffee table. Supplies meant for blisters and kitchen cuts, not trauma like this. Mark's phone flickered to 1 bar. He searched frantically, removing snare from wild animal paw. A wildlife rehab video loaded in fragments. A calm voice explaining tension points. Cut at the right angle. Control the recoil. The video froze, buffered, resumed. The lynx growled under the blanket, low and steady. A warning. Mark found a small pair of bolt cutters in a utility drawer near the fireplace, meant for fence wire or kindling bundles. He knelt beside the lynx. The smell hit him: wet fur, blood, cold air. He slid the cutters against the steel where it was tightest. The lynx jerked violently. A claw ripped through the blanket and caught Mark's forearm. Pain flared. Warm blood ran down his sleeve. They both froze. The lynx's eyes were fully open now, bright, amber, sharp. This was the moment to quit. Open the door, step back. Let nature take its course. Instead, Mark reset the cutters. Hold him, he said. Sarah pressed down with shaking hands. Mark squeezed. The steel resisted. He squeezed harder. The snare snapped with a sharp, metallic crack. The sudden slack made the lynx thrash once, then collapse. Panting hard, but no longer bound, the wire fell away. The room went silent except for breathing, theirs and his. They worked quickly. Saline rinse, gauze pressure, antiseptic. The wound was deep, but not shattered. When Mark pressed gently above the injury, the paw twitched. Circulation, a fragile, hopeful sign. They wrapped it carefully, not tight enough to cut blood flow, just enough to protect it. All the while, the lynx watched, not docile, not tame, aware. By dawn, the storm had passed. Pale blue light filtered through frost-lined windows. The world outside looked untouched, clean, almost peaceful. The lynx was sitting upright now, blanket off, bandaged paw tucked slightly but bearing weight. Mark and Sarah stood a few feet away, giving him space. For a long moment, then the lynx rose, tested his paw, flinched but held steady. He looked at the door, then back at them. There was no softening in his expression, no cinematic gratitude, just a long, measured look. Mark opened the door slowly. Cold air poured in. The lynx stepped onto the snow, paused at the edge of the porch, and turned his head once. Then he disappeared into the trees like he'd never been there. They stood in the doorway long after he was gone. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Later that afternoon, Mark stepped outside to split wood. He felt it first. That prickling awareness along the spine. He scanned the tree line. Nothing. But in the fresh snow around the cabin were tracks, large, round, circling the perimeter. Not random wandering, a pattern. That night, a distant wolf howl rolled through the valley, deep, close enough to matter. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Seconds later, a sharp, slicing scream cut through the dark. Lynx. The howl stopped. The next morning, they found wolf tracks at the edge of the clearing. They didn't come closer. Around the cabin, though, lynx tracks circled wide and steady. For the rest of their stay, whenever they hiked the short ridge behind the cabin or walked along the frozen creek, they would sometimes catch a flicker of gray moving parallel through the trees, never approaching, never retreating, shadowing. Maybe it was territory, maybe coincidence, or maybe something simpler. A door opened, steel cut. A choice made. Mark still carries a thin white scar on his forearm. Whenever people ask about it, he doesn't start with the storm. He starts with the knock, because sometimes the wild doesn't ask politely. It hits your door in the middle of the night, and who you are is decided in the few seconds before you reach for the handle. If it were you, storm raging, something slams into your door. Do you open it? And if you saw what they saw, would you bring it inside?